Well, welcome everybody. I'm excited to be with Dr. Jumper. I took one of his courses at AGTS for seminary in 2019. And so I knew him then as kind of the Old Testament Randy Jumper, and I'm excited to know him now as kind of the New Testament, nicer, kinder, not professor over me person. And so I love getting to follow his ministry. He is a young adults pastor in Arkansas. He's creator of the youngadultministry.org, written many times on young adult ministry. And he just told me before we got started here that he has been in campus in young adult ministry for 20 plus years, which is just insane. And so to have that type of depth and knowledge is incredible. So I just want to say welcome to everybody here. Welcome to Dr. Jumper, Randy Jumper. And if you have questions as we go here, like I said, please just mute yourself and you can slip up your hand and we can call on you. We'll open it up for questions too. You can type them in the chat and we can address them that way, but we do want to hear from you. And let's see here. But yeah, feel free to ask questions. We'll do a Q&A at the end as well. But like I said, this is Randy Jumper. I am Jimmy Leasure. I am the associate pastor at Hillside Church in Mankato, Minnesota. I don't actually lead young adults right now. I started our young adults at our church a few years ago, and it kind of took off. And that's my history with it. I've been on Josiah's team for the past couple years now, and everything that he's doing in Minnesota and the United States. And so we're excited for this chance to interview Dr. Jumper. And so why don't you go ahead and just share a little bit about yourself, talk about your story, your journey, maybe your ministry experience.
Sure. Thanks, Jimmy. It's an honor to be here. Actually, I'm going to break the rules right away. He said for you to mute, and most of you muted your picture. So let me do this for you. I have been a part of untold gazillion Zoom call conference events in the last 12 months. And so what drives me nuts is there's a talking head at the front and no place for interaction. The conference has been amazing so far, and we've had great time, but it's been a lot of screen watching. My crew, we got about 25 or 30 of us here from our leadership team who are watching. Most of them are eating Chick-fil-A currently, so that's probably why they're blocked. So I'm guessing you're probably eating as well, but could you do me a favor? Just for the next few moments, could you unmute and could you go live so we can see you? Because I am tired of staring at who else is tired of staring and not speaking? And so we're also gonna do another thing. Some of you may know my lead pastor. His name is Rod Loy. He's spoken a lot of district events, done a lot of activities, and I've learned something from Pastor Rod through the years, that the best way to make people like you in a session is to give away stuff. So throughout this whole thing, I have gift cards and books and resources that I'm going to give away. So when we go to the other groups, you can make fun of them and say, you should have gone to my breakout session because my dude was better than yours. So here's what we're going to do. I want you to introduce I'm going to call on you as best as I can. And what I want you to do is I want you to identify yourself. So just tell me your name. Tell me where you're at in the world. Tell me why you came to Young Adult Conference in 30 seconds or less. And if I was buying you ice cream tonight, what flavor would that be? Okay. So we're going to start. All I can do is screen names. So I'm just going to go across it. So Gabe, you're the best looking Gabe Thomas I've ever seen. I'm going to assume that you're not Gabe Thomas, but
yeah, sorry, I'm on my husband's account. He's actually back there on a different call. My name is
transitions or something. I don't know what's happening, but tell us about you, where you're from.
Yeah, sorry. My name is Marissa Thomas. I'm from Stillwater, Minnesota. My husband and I lead the young adults ministry there. That's why we're a part of this conference. I also work at the district office for the Minnesota Assemblies of God with the youth department. So we work with Josiah and Micah pretty closely, and my coworkers help put this conference on. So that's another fun tie I have to the conference. And if you were going to buy me ice cream tonight, it would definitely be chocolate peanut butter. I think that was everything.
Ben.
Hi, Ben Harapiak. I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. It's about a 7-hour drive northwest of Minneapolis. And I lead a young adult ministry there. And my favorite ice cream would be just good old fashioned chocolate.
You, Ben, have just made it where now I can claim on my website and podcast that I'm an international speaker. So
Exactly.
thank you, Ben,
Yeah.
for joining it. My ministry just moved forward. So awesome. Thank you so much. And then I'm going to butcher this because I'm from the South. Is it Gal? Did I get it right?
Yeah, that was right. Hi, everybody. I'm Gao. I'm from Maplewood, Minnesota, and I serve at the Young Adult Ministry at my local church in St. Paul. And I help serve with my sister who leads the ministry. So that's why I'm here. And if you were to buy me ice cream, I would probably get chocolate with some kind of like fudge brownie bites in there.
There you go. Sierra?
Hi, yes, I'm Sierra, and this is my husband, Joe.
Hi.
And we are volunteer leaders for Josiah and Micah's Chi Alpha. So we live in Crystal. And my ice cream of choice would be mint ice cream.
And chocolate chip cookie dough for sure.
There you go. Joshua?
Yeah, my name is Joshua Lester. I work at a church just right outside of Columbus, Ohio, originally from Florida. But I lead, I'm a resident, so like high class intern, but basically my focus right now is young adult ministry and student ministry at one of our campuses about 5 minutes from OSU. And if you were to buy me ice cream, it had to be double chocolate chip.
There you go. Darren and Lexi, you're important and all, but I'm really not interested in you. If you could bring the special guest closer to the screen, so the rest of you, and any moment when I get boring, just do that.
Yeah, right,
Just do that. Any moment when I'm boring, everyone will re-engage.
Hey, he's the reason why we haven't been unmuted, and our 2-year-old just went to bed. So
Yeah. So, hey, well, we're Darren and Lexi, my wife, and we are young adult pastors at River of Life Church in Hamilton, Georgia. So, what was the next?
ice cream.
Ice cream. Mine would have to be like chocolate Reese's, kind of.
Mine's birthday cake.
And Jake?
Yeah, my name is Jake. I'm a youth and young adults pastor in Sartell, Minnesota at the Waters Church. I've been doing youth stuff there for years, but just started doing young adult stuff in September. And so pretty new to all of this. And so that's part of the reason why I'm here. And if you were to buy me ice cream, it'd have to be cookie dough for sure.
Cool. Well, I wish I could buy all you ice cream in person. Obviously, that can't happen, but I am going to do a couple things. I just put my email address in the chat. If you'll fire me an email and give me your mailing address, I'm going to send you a whole bunch of books and resources. I've got a bunch of young adult curriculum pieces. I realize I'm off weird. This is by Kyle Eidelman. There's a couple other resources, some curriculum young adult stuff that I'm going to send to everybody. We'll reference a couple of them along the way, but if you'll get my email and send it to me, that way I'll just give me a good mailing address and I can send it to you. We're recording this, and so my team who's laughing says I give things away and forget that I told them, so we're going to get the recording so I'll know what I sent. Ben, I got a $25 gift card for you because you're from the farthest away. I'm assuming it was Canada, and so it'd be great if not, let me know. And then Jake, you were the first person on the phone call. You came and you left, but you came back, which every girl ever dated in college just left. None ever came back. So you also get a $25 gift card. Send it to me. So your address, and we'll send it to you. I can at least buy you guys some ice cream. But here's how we're going to do this. I have been in college or working with college students since 1993. So I'm as old as dirt. And I have filled out a FAFSA every year since 1993, either myself or helping one of my students or young adults that process, which means I have a little bit of perspective, and I've tried everything 3 times. And so if there's any value that I have in having this conversation, it's really just speaking from a broad overview of some pieces. And I really liked what Grant was saying before, especially about relevance and long-term stuff. I've done young adult ministry when it was cool, skinny jeans phase. It began with the church polos with a logo. That was cool. That was really cool in young adults. Then there was the flipped collars up, folded back collars with different things. That was the really cool thing. I've been through flat bill hats, beanie hats, turned back hats, no hats. I've been through comb over, no comb over back again. I've been through shave your head because you're not because it's cool, but because you have to. Stage. I've done all that stuff, and I gave up being relevant about 7 years ago because I was crappy at it the whole time. So Jimmy's got some questions that he's going to ask me, kind of leading. Here's what I'd like to do. If you have a question that comes along while I'm talking, hit it in the chat, and I'll probably call on you and say, hey, ask your question and give texture. And then I've got material prepared, but I do not want to talk for 30 minutes because really all great discovery is done through dialogue. Learning is done through contribution, interaction. So I may spin and ask a couple of you along the way how it's working. So Jimmy, lead me at the first couple questions. And then if you got something, raise your hand or throw it out there and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So, I mean, starting 20 years ago, I mean, young adults are starting to kind of emerge and become popular now. But what made you follow that, or what was the calling for you for young adults before it was even talked about?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it on accident. I think ministry callings, I think the Lord speaks to us for callings, and he speaks to us often in the conversations and the understandings that we already have. So for example, every 15-year-old kid, when they feel called to ministry, feels like they're called to be a youth pastor because the youth pastor's cool. They plays ping pong all day and gets to work at church and only works on Sunday. And God speaks in that vein. And so that's what they understand. I didn't want to be a youth pastor. I grew up AG, Assemblies of God. So I didn't want to be on church staff. And so I like to preach, and I thought I was good at it. So I was going to be an evangelist back then because that's what my options were. And so I traveled around and preached a lot of churches. I was an evangelist in the Assemblies of God, which was funny because I preached a whole lot. Nobody ever got saved. So I don't know why I was an evangelist, but that's what the category was. But along the way, I met a guy named Earl Krebs. I don't know if any of you know Earl. Earl was the kind of the cutting edge Assemblies of God leader about that time, who was working a whole lot with postmodernity, was working at our seminary, was teaching, and he and I teamed up and we formed the very first social media group that we knew of. This was not Facebook. This was prior to all that. So before the Young Adult Leaders Facebook group, there was a listserv of emails that was called Postmodern Pentecostals. And that's what we all emailed each other in this cycle. And that's what really started wrapping me in young adult ministry. I started working in the community that I was in to reach college students and young adults. And then ultimately I was traveling around the districts, and I came to Arkansas district and spoke at district council on reaching a young adult generation in a district council workshop. And then the pastor of the church where the place was held was Rod Loy. Walked off the platform and he said, "Why don't you come do this here?" And I said, "Sure, whatever." And then 4 hours later, I had a job offer, and that was 17 years ago. So I'm also passionate about this generation. I love college students and young adults. I think from a personal perspective, the reason I stay in it and haven't left is I think kids ministry is foundational. I think youth ministry is pivotal. I think it's all laying cards for young adulthood when they actually make their own decisions about faith. That is all about putting Legos on the table so that in young adulthood they're put together to build the house. And I have seen over and over and over again millions of dollars and efforts put into kids ministry and student ministry where we gave people the tools but never gave them the plans of how to build their life. And we said, "All right, you're 18, go." And I really like being a part of that process of them, how that tools owning their own faith. in that process. So that's probably why the long answer to your short question. So.
I love that. That's great. That's probably what a lot of us probably see if you're working within a church. I know even in my church that I'm working in now, our youth budget, our kids' budgets, it's astronomical compared to what young adults get. It's kind of just young adults is this other thing that we do. And so yeah, I really resonate with that. I'm sure a lot of people here do as well. You were talking about some of the trends that you've seen as you've gone through being a young adults pastor. But really what, maybe within the last 5 years, past 3 years, what trends kind of have you seen start to emerge in young adults that you haven't seen before?
Yeah, trends are hard to manage in 2021. I think everyone would concede that we just had a wallop year to trends. Real fast, by show of hands, I'm going to make the differentiation between church-based ministry and campus-based ministry, meaning a lot of us on this call are based local church and out. Others are based on a more of a college campus. That's campus ministry. How many of you would be campus ministry primarily? You'd be campus ministry. How many of you would be church-based? That's really interesting because normally in these conversations and events, it's almost very heavily campus ministry. And so those of you campus ministry, just know that I love you, and we have our Chi Alpha is here with us. But let me say the number one trend is campus ministry is going to become, in my opinion, less and less important over the next 15 to 20 years. The way specifically we've done it, and here's the reason why. All statistics at this point tell us that less and less people are going to college out of age of 18. So all of the online phenomenon is changing. How we do college ministry. My local college campus here, both of them, I've talked to both VPs there. They essentially are never going to build a dorm again. That is their conversation right now. Non-residential, it's going to move all commuter. It's going to move all online. That is where that trend is going, which means campus ministry, if it's going to survive, is going to have to be tied to a local church. I think that's a trend. I think another trend, let me put it this way, another hopeful trend that I have, that I'm beginning to see that COVID may have forced the issue, is that young adult ministry is going to have to be much more intentional about relationship building rather than service building. When I got into this, we all were looking at Andy Stanley's church, because at that point it was a young adult ministry. It was not a church. North Point was a young adult ministry of his father's church, not a church. We were looking at Willow Creek. They had their group. We were looking at all these things and saying, we got to have a young adult service. That's what you got to do. And that didn't work, even in those big churches. They've all functionally stopped. And I think hopefully we're going to move to relationship building versus service building. I think another trend that is developing is I'm Assemblies of God. I'm tried and true. I'm from the South, the Bible Belt. So I've got the 16 fundamental truths, if you know what those are. I got all of them tattooed down my left leg. I am all in on it. Our distinctive for years in the Assemblies of God was that we were spirit-filled, and our worship was exuberant. We spoke in tongues and we lifted our hands. That is no longer our distinctive. It may be our theological position, but it is not our distinctive anymore, because I went to our Baptist student ministry about a year and a half ago to an event they had. All of their kids were raising their hands. They were singing the same music we were, and their groups were talking about spiritual gifts and speaking in tongues at the Baptist groups. Those aren't our distinctives anymore. We now do have distinctives. Our distinctives are that we believe women should be in ministry and have an equal footing with men. That better be a trend, because that's going to distinguish us from others. That and maximizing that we see, careful with how you quote me on this one, we see gender fluidity in ministry calling. What I mean by that is we see men and women as equally valid, and we should be leveraging those. Also, even though we ran away from it, our early beginnings as Pentecostals were multi-ethnic, multiracial. And so that will be our trend, that can be our trend as well. And so quite frankly, I love this conference, but the first thing I said to my wife when I got the event is, if everyone looks like me, I'm not sure I want to speak at this. I work in a multi-ethnic church, and my African-American and Asian people asked me, why are there only white dudes speaking at this? So I think that trend's going to happen at young adult ministry. Now, I know Dr. Kim's speaking, so that was a bit of an overstatement, but those are the trends I see happening. I think if we don't embrace that context or culture, we'll leave the young adults that are currently coming up, because it's not only their expectation, it's not their desire. If it ain't there, they're walking away.
That's powerful. That's I know for me, it's just sobering to hear some of those details, especially, I mean, some of the ones you said right away with campus ministry. It's stuff like that gets me fired up, though. It's kind of that fight or flight thing, and I'm ready to kind of put up for it. So maybe this is a good question that we can open up to everybody. But for you, Randy, what have you seen through COVID that, I mean, obviously your ministry had to adjust. You had to pivot somehow. What did you try right away that maybe flopped or wasn't working? But what has emerged from that you would say this is taking our church for the better? So
I'll answer that question, and then we're going to turn around and talk to everybody else, because my clock on my computer says 6:31. We're going to talk about this for 4 minutes and no more, because I'm sick of talking about COVID. And also, I think COVID caught the church by surprise, and we were 3 months late. Guys, the end of COVID is coming. We better be talking post-COVID right now. I'm not talking about implementing things right now, but I'm saying what is coming. And so, Jimmy, I'm going to push back and say what we tried that didn't work is not relevant for this conversation today, because here's what I also know. We got people in Georgia on this call. We got people in Minnesota and Arkansas and Ohio. Experienced 20 Zoom calls back last year, and every one of them applied and didn't, because every context is different. So what I would say with this, I'm not trying to be a punk. What I'm saying is ministry principles are the same no matter what context you're in. And the lesson to learn from COVID was, we better be committed to flexibility on the things that are not essential. And then we better find ways to bring essential back. So I would say right now, the conversation should be, what are we about to do? My crew, we're in a state that is opening up, but we've not, everybody's different. We can't have meal functions. So tonight we're eating at this event watching, but they're all 6 feet apart at separate tables. Others, I spoke at an event a few weeks ago via online. When we went to it, everyone was sitting together eating. They were doing everything but making out. I mean, I was like, what are you people doing? How are you able to do this? It's just their context. We're actually hosting an event for the West Florida district today at our church, and talking to them. They're wide open. Here's my fear for my crew. They are so hungry for relationship. We're about to binge on activities because we haven't had them. And I'm afraid that I'm going to wear myself out, and I'm going to wear them out trying to do everything at once, and everything at once doesn't work. I often say this: Netflix is great for binging, but you can't ever remember what happened in episode 7 because you're now in episode 46. So there's some sense of we got to guard our own spirits and our own lives right now as we move into the post-pandemic. And that phrase is about to be on everybody's articles and books, is post-pandemic ministry. So I would challenge you on this call to start thinking about post-pandemic. What are we going to do? What are we never going to do again? So I've been waiting to kill. I had a Bible study that was toxic, was challenging, and had influential leaders in it. And I didn't know how to stop it. And just like the Hebrew children in the fire, what the devil intended for harm, God intended for good. So that Bible study is never coming back. And when they asked me, when are we going to start that again? I said, you know what, man, we got to think new. But I had to plan ahead to have something to replace it. And so we're looking right now, like for our first conferences, our first retreats, our first stuff. So I'd say there. So I'm done with my 6:35. I talked about it for 4 minutes. So can I ask a question back to everybody else? First, do you guys agree or disagree with me on the ethnicity, female involvement in ministry? Has that been your experience? Was I too strong in that, or is that your own experiences where you're at? And maybe the best way in a group setting like this is if you got a comment on it, and I'll call on you. And then Gal, who are you holding? Because we got competing beautiful babies right now, huh?
My daughter just woke up, so she's just hanging out.
Cool.
Sorry.
So what do you trends think I'm overboard a little bit? I mean, I really want to hear from your parts of the world because I only have mine. How important is multi-ethnic? How important is gender, having men and women active in ministry important to us in young adult world? Don't make me call on you.
I'll answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So in our context, like we're in the South, so we're, a lot of churches don't really appreciate women leaders in the church or recognize them as important or valid. We've been lucky enough to be at a church that actually recognizes my husband and I as pastors in the church. And I have seen a direct correlation in our young adults that the girls that were in leader feel empowered, like leadership decisions. They see us as a cohesive unit rather than just, Pastor Aaron and like I'm just taking care of and making food, like they can come to me and trust me. And then in turn, they're using that as a springboard for their own leadership. So I think it's very important.
Go ahead, Jake.
I was just going to say, so our context is we're a smaller town community. Our city's like 14,000 some. And so the ethnic racial stuff isn't super big because it's small town Minnesota and it's pretty white. But the female side of things is almost half of our pastoral staff is females. And so that's been something that from our lead pastor, it's been huge. And even like as far as like from on our leadership team for youth and for young adults, we have coaches, which are like leaders over leaders type of thing. But many women involved in coaching roles over other leaders as well. And not just over other women, but over guys as well. And so that's been super huge. We've been trying to actually find the racial piece that you were talking about. We've been trying to find different ways of how we can get other people of different ethnicities and things like that involved on stage, having them speak and stuff like that, because we see exactly what you're saying. And I know that Gen Z was a lot of what Grant talked about, but Gen Z is very, very multi-ethnic, multiracial and stuff like that. And so I 100% agree that that's going to be a growing trend in churches.
Jake, you nailed it. It is one thing to have women doing ministry. It is completely different to have women doing leadership over men. That's the distinctive. I don't just have women speak. I have women who oversee and lead all levels. And for us, that's a distinctive. Like we leverage that. So Facebook advertising, Instagram advertising, stuff we make big deals of. We never make a big deal about me preaching. I mean, why would we? But when we have something that flies in the face of our culture that's sin and wrong, that's what we champion. And so y'all are all too young, but that's why people came to Pentecostal churches in the early 20th centuries, because we were different from their other churches. There was something about our experience that was different. And so we got to find the right things to champion again. So that's good stuff. Anyone else got another comment on that before we move on to the other questions?
Yeah, I was going to add to that too. So we do Chi Alpha. So I'm not only in college ministry, but I'm also in education. I'm a teacher. So just both of those roles, like knowing how important it is to young minds, whether we're talking kids or young adults, to have somebody that looks like them. And that goes just beyond gender, right? It goes into racial too. Like, it's important for churches to also be, trying to find multiracial staff too. But yeah, so definitely agree. It's important.
For me, this is the biggest easy win we already have available. Like, if we were Baptists, no offense if you are, we'd have to convince everybody theologically. We'd have to justify our arguments. We already have them. Like, we've already, whether we do in practice or not, that's irrelevant, but we have it. I'm from the South too. We have problems with it, and different people have problems with it, but it's really, really helped us. So really good insight. Thank you guys. Jimmy, you got some other questions? Or again, if you guys have questions, type them in the chat along the way, because we're going to interact back and forth on this.
Yeah, I'm taking notes. I'm loving exactly everything that I'm hearing. I know as I was poking kind of through your website that you have, yaministry.org, I saw something about development in faith, facilitating young adults in the development of their faith. But, kind of what Grant Skeldon was talking about, we have to be more than just being able to hype up church or intro or whatever. We have to be better than just event coordinators. So I think a lot of times we focus on trying to just get people through the doors. But what I was seeing on your website was that you were interested in facilitating young adults in the development of their faith. Could you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's probably my sweet spot and where I'm at right now in my own journey. I told you guys earlier, I chased cool for years, and relevancy and hot and poppin'. And I came to the realization that, first of all, I never was those things anyway. So why was I chasing something I never was to begin with? And secondly, I read this book called Young Adult Ministry. It was written in 1987. Okay. So I read that book late 90s. So it was about a 15-year-old book. And I thought, man, this is amazing. These principles. It was by Terry Hershey. It's a classic young adult book. It's probably the first real book in evangelical world on young adult ministry. None of it, the practical stuff fit, but his understanding of the principles of young adult ministry were just right, spot on. Then a couple years later, I read some stuff by Gabe Lyons and Dan Kinnaman. Those are the people who are in Q that Grant's from. They had these books mid 2000s on young adult ministry. They had the best principles, and you know what? They were the exact same principles reworded as the one that was written in 1987. Then I read a book by Ken Baugh called Generational Ministry, I think is the title of it, about young adult ministry, written for the first round of millennials. Great stuff, the exact same principles. And it led me to this conclusion about 10 years ago, that we are all victims of our own moment, and we all think we're the first people in history to ever do this. And what my discovery, my opinion, you guys can disagree, is your generational influences are not as important as the natural tendencies in faith development. That young adults are the same young adults that have existed throughout history. And so what I refer to it as, it's a complex migration of moving from adolescence to adulthood. My great-grandmother was 14 years old when she got married. That was not uncommon in her area. She was a young adult at 15 because she had a child at 15. Like a lot of you, I travel the world. I've been in third world countries all over. That age range is an adult. It has nothing to do with your age. It has to do with your stage of life. And that stage of life of migration is catalyzed and influenced by your culture, but the same situations, the same sort of separating from, moving from sources. James Fowler wrote a book called Stages of Faith. A psychologist, he calls it critical distancing. The idea that when you're a little kid, you learn fairy tales, you learn truth, you learn value, you learn to trust your parents. You learn that Santa Claus is real and he brings gifts, and Easter bunnies leave eggs. Then you come to early childhood, you discover that isn't really true. Your parents were there. then you start learning pieces, but it is in young adulthood that you begin to own your faith and you begin to distance yourself from authority sources so you can create your own authority. And that sounds negative, but really that's what has to happen. If your young adults are going to have their own faith, they've got to create their own faith. And so the principles of young adulthood have never changed, at least in my 20 plus years. The basics are the basics. Kids are going to want to know, young adults want to know what God's will for their life is. They want to know what to look for in relationships, healthy, both romantic and non-romantic. They want to look at career and vocational choices. They want to be able to articulate their faith. They want to be able to express their faith in whatever technological modus operandi is at the moment. Bottom line, they're the same people in different clothes every generation. And so while we have moments as an emphasis, so last year, 2020, young adults worldwide were rocked by George Floyd. I'm not saying we're not engaging in those areas, but we have to understand those are just enzymes, catalyzers to the overall faith development. And this is what we get to do as young adult leaders, is we have to stay, I call it the ministry of presence. We have to stay in their presence. We have to be in their face that says, while you are distancing, you'd never distance yourself from me. That I am present. And I may not be teaching you, but I am here and I am with you. And my involvement in your life is not to dictate where you go, but my involvement in your life is to help you migrate through the complexity of your current situation to your lifelong Christ follower. I 100% reject the idea that everybody has to have a moment of walking away from the Lord in their early 20s to sow their wild oats. If that's true, then the gospel is not true, because Christ calls us to follow him, not to follow him, except for in your 20s when you're going to go have fun. He didn't say to young adult, teenage disciples, come follow me, except for when you're 21 and you want to try weed and you want to have a good time. I understand you're going to kind of come, but 25, 27, when you get married and have a kid, come on back. I'll be waiting for you. Jesus didn't do that. Lifelong, fully committed followers. If the gospel's transformative, we got to do that. And we got to believe that. Now, does that mean we ignore those realities? Of course not. We got to embrace them. We got to leverage them. I don't show up wearing outfits from the 1950s. I don't ignore the realities of our current culture. We embrace those. But faith development, if you really want to study this, James Fowler is the guy to really read. He's got his classic work is Stages of Faith Development. The best one for young adulthood is Becoming Adult, Becoming Christian. What a great title. I wish I had come up with it. He wrote that book. It's fabulous. Really, really, really good book. So I don't know if that helps with that, but that migration piece of faith development, I think that's really important. That's why I'm in young adult ministry. It's to help our students, help our young adults develop their faith during this time.
And that's awesome. I appreciate you even just saying some resources like that for us to check out and dive into this a little bit deeper. We've got about maybe 7 minutes left here with our time. And so I wanted to kind of hit on the topic of mentorship. I know that was a huge thing in my life and something that I sought out. And I know it's one of your talking points on your website too, and on your podcast I listened to. But what specifically do you think young adults are looking for in mentors? I know a lot of people here are leading young adult ministries, campus ministries. And so we want to be great mentors for some of these young adults that are coming through our ministries. And so what would you say are some of the things for us to kind of dial in on?
So I think most of us we've already talked. Most of you've already mentioned in some way when you've talked. I think the era of the celebrity communicator is probably over for a little while. It may come back because it does come back through history. I think here's a disservice that we have done. This is a negative trend I've observed, to go back to one of the original questions. is somehow this, and Grant talked about this a little bit. Whenever I talked with a young adult group, typically ones like who have volunteer staff, I say, so what do you do with your young adults? And they say, we have small groups. And I go, awesome. So what do you do with small groups? And their small groups usually fall into two categories. Category one is it's really a preaching service where the guy preaches for an hour or the girl preaches for an hour. But the difference is he's sitting in his living room and everyone's bored looking at their phones while they're talking for an hour. And then he says, what do you guys think? And then they don't say anything. Or number two, they show a video of Furtek preaching or Christine Kane preaching or Randy Jumper preaching. And then they watch a sermon. They may even use Right Now Media. They may use Worship How Media. They use all these great resources. And so they go to church in a living room as opposed to a sanctuary. I'm pleading with you to stop doing that. If that's your model and that's working for you, I applaud you. Mentorship and discipleship is really about conversations. We use curriculum and we use those things, but I don't allow any of our leaders to show videos like that because the reason why they do it is they're intimidated. They're like, man, I watched this Steve Furtek's kind of one of the ones. They're like, oh, he's amazing. He's great. I'm like, well, yeah, but we can't have talking heads. We have to have community speak. And the dialogue process in group discipleship is the key. If you're discipling or mentoring someone and you talk more than you ask questions, then you really aren't reaching your maximum moment. So I have a couple young adults that I'm interacting with consistently right now. Daniel, he may even be listening somewhere in here. Daniel Carson came to me yesterday with a question about leading. And I said, so she gave me her idea. And then I said, so what do you think? And she goes, I don't care. I want to know what you think. I said, I want to know what you think. I let her talk. She had the right conclusion. God speaks to our young adults. If we have to trust that the Lord is going to guide them. Will they get it right? Of course not. Will they make mistakes? Of course. The key to mentorship is to gently walking beside them. I like the metaphor of dance. And the difference is I'm not leading, they're leading, I'm following, but I'm making sure they don't fall off the dance floor. I'm moving with them and guiding them to the right conclusions. Most of our discipleship stuff is conversation based. I may even say things I don't necessarily agree with just to have them interacting. I would say right now, really, 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 the future of this is talking and is listening more than talking. Is that you guys' experience too? I've never met a 20-something who didn't want to tell me their opinion. And if they're coming to a Bible study, most of them want to say it. They come to a small group, they come to a discipleship point, they want to contribute.
Yeah, I've really observed that. I was leading on an Ephesians session a couple weeks ago, and I really noticed as I was doing this when I was able to engage them so that they were like talking about their faith, they were really engaged. But if I was saying something that's like, wow, I think what I'm saying has like great theological weight, I'm doing really well at this, they'd be, looking down at their phones. So I've definitely seen that.
Here's a good example. One of my favorite things to do. I do it about every 3 years. The another beauty is if you stay in college young adult ministry is every 3 years you can repeat your material because they've all graduated and move on. So if something works good, just wait. Be in ministry long enough, you get to pull the trigger and do it all over again. I'll do a printout and I'll have 2 pieces of paper. I'll divide my group into 2 groups. I'll give them one that has all the series of sermon or Bible verses about Jesus, friend of sinners, Jesus who ate with sinners, those accusations from them, and then those statements from Jesus and from Paul that talks about going into the world and being friends of sinners. Then I'll give the second group a sheet of paper that talks about bad company corrupts good morals. I'll use the Proverbs passages that say, do not eat with a person who causes you to sin, I'll use Paul's words that flee the immoral brother. And then I'll have them independently go through and come up, what is your conclusion? What is it we as followers of Jesus Christ are supposed to do? Group one will say we need to eat with sinners, we need to hang out with them, we need to be best friends with lost people. Group two says we need to make sure we're not defiled and we stay away from them. And so then I'll ask a question. So who was wrong, Jesus or Paul? So either Jesus was right, we should eat with sinners, or Paul was right that says we can't even eat with people who are sinners. So would Paul have corrected Jesus just like the others? Which one is it? Well, I'll just tell you, I don't have to worry about coming up with content. They'll fill the next hour. Those tension things, those grabbing hold and grinding out the truth, that's spectacular. And really good mentors and really good guides take them on that journey to the right conclusion.
I love that. So you're not necessarily giving the answer, you're letting them figure it out for themselves.
Now, you got to have an answer. I mean, you're going to get some wacky stuff. So you got to do the work on the front end. But if you lead with the answer, you short-circuited the discovery process. Leading with the answer short circuits the discovery process. This is the difference between mentorship and discipleship in the preaching moment. I understand that we're playing semantics, but when I'm preaching, I'm saying, thus saith the Lord, here are the principles, here are the truths. But when I'm in a one-on-one or I'm in a small group setting, when I'm taking someone on a journey, I want them to discover the truth, not necessarily think I'm brilliant. Here's the truth Randy has.
Gold. I appreciate that. It's definitely stuff you don't typically hear. And so the insights that you've brought to the table come from a life really of dedication to young adults. And so just appreciate your wisdom. Everybody else, we are out of time. If you have more questions for Randy, I'm sure he put his email there. I'm sure he wouldn't mind if you hit him up and asked away. And so thank you all for being on this call. I'm actually putting the link for YouTube. I don't think that's the right link though. So don't click that link. You should probably have a better link than I do. But thank you all. Can we give it up for Randy? Thank you.
Let me say two resources. Go check out yaministry.org. Everything is there. It's free. Everything. My church paid for the creation of materials for our young adult ministry. So there's no reason in the world I should hold it back from anyone else. So there's curriculum that we've written and used there. There's all kinds of other stuff. Anything you want to use is there. It's free. Go to yaministry.org and download it. You've got my email. Make sure you send it to me. I just read this book this year, Growing Young. If you haven't read it, it's a great book on young adult ministry in the local church. It's the first study that I've seen of young adult churches or churches with young adult ministries. 100 different churches they analyzed from Catholic to Pentecostal. Their insights are fabulous and outstanding. Thanks, guys, for being there. You got my email. My cell phone number is 501-952-8503. If you ever have a question or something, let me know. I'll be glad to take your call. But God bless you, and we'll look on what's going on next.
Yeah. These guys will see you over on YouTube. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.